This is book 5 of Herodotus right now.
His histories.
Yeah.
So I will let one of you two take it from here.
Okay. This is like a change of pace since the previous chapters, because the last chapters will focus a lot more on the Persians and like the Persian history. The last one, like it was like kind of the Scythians, but like it was a bit more broad last chapter. This chapter I enjoyed much more than the last chapter, because while it didn't have a continuous story throughout all of it, it did focus a lot on the history of the Greek cities.
Yeah. Like Sparta, some of them.
Like Sparta, and like honestly, like not like the Greek cities I think of, but like the eastern ones, like
the ones on the Anatolian coast.
Yeah, like that one. Like they're not necessarily dealing with the mainland Greeks, but like the more eastern parts.
But they were considered Greeks. I mean, well, we know that, but like, so a lot of what we think is like ancient Greek culture, a lot of it obviously came from Athens and Sparta, but quite a bit of it was from like what we now consider Turkey. Mm-hmm. So like, it's good to know that back then these were all Hellenic areas, and they weren't like lesser Greeks or anything like that. So yeah, it's sort of like, what's a good comparison? Like Celts. The Celts came from the middle of Central Europe, but then obviously, and then expanded into the British Isles, France, Germany. There was even some in modern day Turkey. But obviously, with the expansion of the Roman Empire, they had to keep going more and more westward. And now, like, we consider the Celtic nations to be in Ireland, Cornwall, Scotland. Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like the same thing.
Honestly, like we're not dealing with what we think of ancient Greece, but to them it's just Greece.
Exactly.
Yeah. So like this is like mostly focusing on the rebellions that are like being stood up in the Greek states at that time that are under Persian control, and also a few Greek states that they wanted to conquer as well.
Yes.
Can't remember all the states, because we only remember like 3 cities honestly in Greek culture.
Athens, Sparta, and maybe Corinth.
Thebes.
Or Thebes. Yeah.
And if you think of Alexander the Great, then Macedonia, but like
not a city. And a lot of people don't consider them to be Greeks.
Okay, well, whatever. That's a conversation.
Yeah.
That's a conversation from modern history. This is This is
ancient history. Yeah.
For the most part, like it's kind of just like, because like honestly, Darius is in the background of all of this, like
because it's I don't think, like, from what I remember, book 5 doesn't go into Darius's conquests. It's more just like you said, Paul. It's like the city states are in the background, and they're like in history and some of their internal politics. But Darius's conquest is like looming, and it's gonna come eventually, like we know it will.
There's one thing I do find interesting. They go way less in depth of the Greek city states cultures, and I think that's because there should be like an assumption already.
Yeah, so I guess Herodotus, because he wrote in Greek, he would assume that a Greek person would read this, and so it wouldn't even, why bother going into their local culture when we already know it, kind of thing.
So like, yes, like I think like there's a lot of like reading between the lines, because like when we looked at Scythia, when we looked at like all the Persian cities, all the Persian countries, in general, like he went really in depth. In this case, not really. It was just like there'd be like some interesting tidbits on feuds between 2 city states, but for the most part, I think he's just assuming you already know it, or like it's close enough to the culture.
He also does a bit of Athenian history.
Yeah, with the feuds with that city, and I forgot the other city that they had a feud with.
So Sparta, Corinth, might have been Corinth, which is funny. Well, to be continued with Thucydides on that point, but yeah, he also goes a bit into the Ionian revolt, if I remember correctly, right?
Well, that's
much later.
But that's like half of the. That's not just like a small. That's like a pretty decent part, because a lot of it is just like a bunch of city states like being convinced to rebel against the Persians.
Yeah, mostly by the Athenians.
Yes.
The Athenians are really trying to stoke that, right? As we know all the way back in chapter 1, the Persians conquer Anatolia, and they've held it for these past generations. Darius is now on the throne, and the Athenians are really obviously, I don't think Herodotus says this directly, but it's if you're like an Athenian politician, it would make sense for you to be afraid of the Persians. So now you're trying to stoke rebellion in that coastal area to rebel, so to make the Persians weaker, so they can't invade Athens, you know. So yeah,
but I think like they do have like a rightful like like a rightful awareness of the Persians because they do eventually invade. So like,
Yeah.
so like, it's not unjustified.
And a bunch of stuff happens, right? Like we know that the Ionians, they gather at Ephesus. They gather up. They take a city called Sardis, I think.
Yeah.
There's back and forth. There's this Persian general. They're also trying to outmaneuver as well. You also have these people called the Carians.
Yeah.
Who are preparing again. They're also coming into it. What else?
Well, in general, they do seem like, well, a lot of the previous chapters like sometimes talked about like battles and stuff,
And this is really going into battles.
like this is like
picking up.
it's like more like it's going much more in depth, I think, than the previous ones. Because like if you look at even some of Darius's or Cyrus's conquest, like they would just say that they did this and that, and I think that's probably because like they're much more mythologized than these ones.
Yeah, so hence why they're also going into a lot more depth as well. It's nice that finally we're getting like a bit of like what we call the traditional history in there. Less cultures, more like the battles, right? So I think we could safe to say now that Herodotus has he set the stage, and now everything's being put in place. So now we have the background on most of the Greek cultures by now. I don't suspect we're going to get any more history on it. We also have a good background on the Persians, and now we're seeing the battles getting set up, right? The Ionian revolt being the first thing. Like that's the first thing that happens. It's the Ionian revolt, and then me and Dylan, we're already taught the history, but then it keeps, and you obviously know Paul, but it keeps going after. We know sort of what happens. You don't, Paul?
No, I don't know anything about. I don't know much about
Okay,
history.
that's very good because you're gonna be like, this is a great story. I'm telling you.
Funnily enough, this was one of the shorter chapters throughout the book.
This is the shortest chapter, actually.
Yeah,
It's the most action-packed, you would say.
exactly. Despite being the shortest, it was the most action-packed. We get less going on about the history, as we said, and it focuses more on the battles, the interactions, which makes it more interesting.
It's also nice that also Herodotus goes into so the Athenians have a quarrel with Sparta, and sorry, Paul. You also said that
they all agree Athenian and Sparta they have a big quarrel because they're at that time and still probably while he was writing it, the two strongest Greek states.
Yeah.
So obviously, but they did mention I don't remember the exact
Aeginetan, Athenian, Athens having a rivalry.
Oh, because of olives.
Aegina.
Aegina.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because of olives.
Well, not olives, but they didn't pay their tribute or something for the Athenians giving them olive seeds, and then due to some weird technical
in communication,
they had an agreement, and they said unless there's the form of something, then we'll keep paying. Then they had a form, so they stopped paying. Even though there's always that Athenian Spartan enmity rivalry, or you could say, they didn't really there wasn't much action packed right now because I do think at that point in time their bigger concern are the Persians.
Yes. The Persians, you could say at this stage, they're almost like the United States. Is there a better sort of analogy?
I would say Russia, honestly.
Or Russia, but Russia, in early modern Europe, they had the size, but they didn't have the strength, really.
I'm thinking more of modern Russia, where you have all these states that don't necessarily they can get along, but they don't necessarily like each other. But then there's Russia, who forces them to cooperate.
I mean, I would say it's more true of the 1800s, because Russia was even more of a threat back then, right? They had all of modern day Ukraine. They had all of Crimea. Well, they say they have all of Crimea now, but they have all of Ukraine. They have the Baltic. They were much bigger, right? And they were coming down.
Oh, I thought of one, the Napoleonic era.
Yeah.
Everyone, all of these European cities, European countries, fucking hated each other. They want, if they could have nukes back then, they would use them immediately. They would use them immediately. But since Napoleon was way too good at fighting, they all united.
Because eventually, yeah. So in that sense, the Persians are a juggernaut. I mean, the empire that they had created at this point, guys, was the largest empire up to that point. No human empire, no human society had organized itself and achieved what the Persians had achieved. And they were a large, sort of big, huge, multi-ethnic in that they had soldiers from all throughout the empire, and now they're coming down and trying to get into modern day Europe and trying to get into Greece. And obviously that's stoking that war, especially when you got somebody like Darius, and Darius is incredibly smart, and he's very ruthless, and he's very ambitious, and he wants to outdo his ancestor Cyrus so much. Yeah.
There's one thing I do find interesting with with Darius as opposed to Cyrus.
Yes.
There's he delegates a lot more than Cyrus. We talk more about his generals than Darius himself in this chapter.
Yes.
Like his general Megazibus, I don't know what.
Megabazus.
Megabazus. And I think there's another general.
During the Ionian revolt.
Yeah. Like they talk about his
Onesimus?
It might be. Is that the one who gets killed?
Gets major reinforcement. No, Onesimus is with the Ionians.
Or like they talk more about the generals. I'm not sure it's because like it's just much. I can't exactly think of a reason why they talk more about the generals. Do you have an idea?
I guess that also shows like how it's not like being a good leader. It's not about you being the best. It's also who you surround yourself with, right? How many times have we seen a leader who gets too power hungry and then the people around them are like, he's a bit iffy. Let's kill him off. We see, I believe it was early on, where one of the people who I believe survived from the camps, they were offered to own some land, right? And then one of Darius' advisors tells him, "Oh, hey, look, this guy, he owns this territory, but has like a lot of good minerals, a lot of good areas. Like, there's some good stuff we could harvest there. Are we just gonna give it to this guy? Let's find a way, bring him on our side, and then we just take the harvest for ourselves."
Yeah.
Yeah, that was in this chapter, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
It was earlier on.
So my theory is that it could be that like the more recent we're getting, obviously, the more Herodotus is being more and more precise. So it could be that like we're just more precise than like maybe like people didn't really know that much of Cyrus's generals because we didn't have good recordings because it was so long. So we just personify it as to all being Cyrus that's done this. It could also be that the empire was at its infancy and therefore a lot less people, a lot less bureaucracy in it. So make makes sense that a big and for a strong empire like that you need like a strong founder who could like make things happen and do things himself. So it could make sense that Cyrus is more direct than Darius, because as the empire gets bigger and I guess as the bureaucracy gets bigger as well, it makes sense that Darius would delegate more.
I can think of one other reason. Cyrus was pretty much a conqueror. Like that
was in his being, yeah.
Like that was in his being. While Darius, he's also conquered, it's more like his role is different. His role is like I'm the inheritor of this kingdom or of this empire, and
administrator.
He has to take a more administrative role. Honestly, like we've seen, like he could still like do battles and stuff. He's still like really smart.
Yeah.
But like I can think of like in this focus, he's much more of a statesman because like with Cyrus, like he talked about like he was a great leader. They talk a lot about how much he fought, and here they talk more about the decisions he makes as a leader that isn't involved in fighting, but like who
like the political like administration like of his empire.
It'd be like someone does someone does big feats and they're like, okay, what do you want? And then he tries to like say, hey, is that a good thing? And like he does listen to advisors a lot more than scientists. Like maybe not in reality, but what's written down, the advisors do have like a more important role with Darius.
Yeah, they're much more pronounced.
Yeah.
Not sure why. It could just, or it might just be that like we could see Herodotus making the same sort of arc he does with the Achaemenid family that he did with that Anatolian family way back in chapter 1. Could be that as well. So it's like a degeneracy of the heroism, kind of like what you were making about the Iliad, Paul. Like as they get farther away from the gods, the generations get more and more like inferior. Yeah. Which makes sense, right? Because Herodotus is really tight. He's a very educated person. He would have been exposed to the classics, like the Iliad. Probably everyone in ancient Greece would have been exposed to that.
Probably
because they were making plays about him.
Honestly, probably the Persians do about it.
Yeah, probably as well. Anything you guys want?
I'm not sure. I would necessarily agree with that because like it's not like they say that theirs is inferior. Like it's not like they even. I'm not sure you can even extrapolate that. Like I just think like they're just too. Well, like my one theory is like they're just trying to. Herodotus is trying to contrast the two different governing styles of Cyrus and Darius, or that like since Darius is like 2 generations before him or something, that like it's just better recorded. Like you could like there's like it's not like it would be it's that quick for documents to like turn into dust. Like,
Or to just not even writing anything, right? I mean, we also have to consider how difficult it was to write things back then. Gutenberg's printing press wouldn't arrive until like 1,000 years later.
but like I just think like there's probably like if like it's either oral or written, it's still like not sufficiently long enough for it to completely deteriorate.
Got you. Okay, that I think that's like a decent that's a good assumption to go off of.
What would you do?
Yeah.
What do you think about like this contrast between these two?
Of the two leaderships.
Oh, sorry. Or do you think they're similar? Maybe we're wrong. Maybe they're similar.
Well, I think it's definitely, it feels different. I think, again, because it's more recent, I think it's a lot easier to remember this stuff, right? And I guess, like, if he's also getting this information from the locals, they would have a better understanding through oral if it's more recent, right? So I agree. If we're comparing both of them,
Like, do you think Herodotus is doing something deliberate with this comparison?
it's a comparison.
Or do you think so obviously there's more material on Darius because he's more closer to Herodotus' time. But other than that, excluding that, do you think he's intentionally like making some sort of contrast? Or do you think he's like trying to lead the Persian Empire to a certain direction? Do you feel like that way is happening or not? Or
I don't know. Personally, I don't feel like there's a specific angle towards it. I think he's trying his best to retell the history.
which makes sense.
Yeah, but again, with Darius, I think it just shows like he's more willing to communicate, and that's always an important trait as a leader. Where when someone just takes full control, there's always going to be problems with that.
Yeah. Also, the book 5 also talked about how the Phoenicians passed on their alphabet to the Ionian and Greeks.
Yeah, I did talk about that.
That's true. That's it. That's true. So, from an academic standpoint, modern academic standpoint, the Greek alphabet came from the Phoenician alphabet, and I believe the Phoenician alphabet came from Egyptian hieroglyphs. So it's so cool to see like what Herodotus gets right, as much as he also gets wrong. But what he gets right, it's like fuck. Like even back then, he was still able to find some sort of truths. You would think it's like borderline impossible, but this guy still pulls it off, which shows how much of a committed academic he was, especially in a time without modern universities, modern academic methodologies.
I think like he actually did foreshadow that like maybe 2 chapters ago, because he did mention that like obviously I'm not sure that's true, but he did say that Phoenicia is like the oldest civilization. So like he could say like, oh okay, like that makes sense. Like
And it's fair parallel to me.
yeah.
So there's that. Any particular theme you guys think he's portraying, or it's more just like a strict, accurate retelling of the battles? If you guys didn't pick up on anything, you guys just said. Of course, I don't think I picked up on anything, you know.
I didn't feel any specific theme coming out of this. It was like again, they really did retell like just like the story,
The battles.
yeah.
There's something I do find interesting is that like Herodotus never portrays his culture as like the supreme best one. Like
No, absolutely not. In fact, I think we've been beating this with like a dead horse, right? But he said like, oh, the Egyptians, they treat their men and women like pretty equally. Like the women could buy property and trade in the open market, like it's nothing. And he was contrasting this with like Greece or like the Greek city-states who were treating their women like second-class citizens, right? To the point where
they were second-class citizens.
to the point where Euripides, it was Aristophanes. To the point where Aristophanes would think of it to be funny to have a play where the women are in charge. Like to them, that's comedy. Like the fact that women are in charge is like he was also making like a social statement there. Like how different are men from women? He was progressive at the same time conservative, as we have told before. But like, yeah. So the fact that Herodotus isn't like he isn't like so many people you could even say in the modern day who just cling to their cult, like nationalists who just think that their culture is the goddamn best and they can't learn from anything else, and they will deny history, especially in the especially any history that states that there was any sort of mixing of cultures or intermarriage or anything like that. You know what I'm talking about? Those ethno-nationalists, whether in the past or in the present day. So it's so amazing in a time where they didn't have modern technology, right? Where Herodotus couldn't find a lot of people who traveled around the world because it was so difficult, right? They didn't even know the size of the globe or what other continents were there or anything like that. And yet he was able to sort of see, like Paul said, that his culture wasn't necessarily the best, and he wasn't trying to make it that sort of way. Because again, like you could tell that this guy kid gives a shit about the truth. He's a true intellectual, academic, rational person that we all should ascribe to be. We shouldn't just emotionally cling to where we came from and how we socialized. And it's great that somebody from 400 BC, 480 some BC, is doing that day to day. Of course, he will make some statements, but these are strictly moral statements.
Yeah.
I don't really think he made a sort of racist maybe he did, maybe he like referenced
Right before me saying, yeah.
Oh, that's when he was born. So probably like 460 something, like when he started, 450 when he traveled. But yeah, like it's almost like this man is like a modern person. Like it's fucked. Like I don't know how to explain it to you guys.
I think like he had traits that like people in the modern world would find like pretty like admirable. Like,
This is like
like I think here's the best way you can think about it. He's trying his best. Like
he's trying his best, but you see a certain methodology coming out of this, which would like if he was still alive and he finds out that he's the father of history and like what the field that he sort of started has come to, like he'd probably be happy and be blown out of his mind because this guy's committed to the truth, right? And so the historical method, it's now become much better than what it was back then. Probably didn't even exist, right? And just to go to history, imagine if he was still alive and visited history departments and universities and found out everything after and before his time and how they found out, like using the methodology.
he would probably still do history today.
But he would be blown away in the same way that Charles Darwin was born, like got resurrected and saw what evolution, saw all the evidence that piled up to confirm his earlier theory. It's just, or imagine if Isaac Newton came back alive and saw how Einstein blew his theories out of the park. Just amazing. I think, in the very in the first book, like not the Iliad, like in the intro to the whole collection, the editor Mortimer Adler, the editor of the great books, he was talking about like.
We still haven't rated, so you have to tell us.
Yeah. So he was talking about a classical education, right? The liberal arts education is all about sort of questioning things. The Western method, the way the West has like progressed, has been through this like cultural thing of we need to question, right? We need to have discussion, a conversation. We need to pass things down. We need to question each other and build on each other and all this. And we see that the intelligent people of this time, what are they doing? They are moving the ball. They are breaking like norms, and because of their quest for truth, you see that they're pushing it in a very good intellectual direction. If you're like a progressive person, you could easily see these people as extremely early progressives, especially with Herodotus in terms of like what you were talking about.
Well, I think by nowadays, like pretty much most people would have some form of admiration. Honestly, like they would always, everyone would mention all their faults. Like you can't get around that. But like they, like you still have to like admire the fact that like they're willing to go through like all of this to find like to advance
knowledge.
To advance knowledge. Like again, if you look at the first page of Herodotus, his whole thing, he's like he just wants to take these down for future generations.
Yeah.
Like we probably read this in an earlier video.
No, we did.
But
you can do it again, Paul.
But it says like these are the researches of Herodotus of Halicarnassus, which he publishes in the hope of thereby preserving the decay of remembrance of what men have done, and of preventing the great and wonderful actions of the Greeks and the barbarians.
So what you were saying with like he doesn't put the Greeks on a pedestal, he wants to remember the great actions of not just the Greeks but the barbarians. The culture doesn't matter.
And I think like that's like a very like forward way thinking, because like
Transcendental.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the name of that sort of philosophy. Transcendental. That means you see people as people and not as just lines on a map on borders.
But like you see like how he's trying to like he sees like the value in preserving history, like in and of itself.
He sees the value in like what the triumphs that humans have done. He doesn't categorize them. He doesn't just think that Greeks are the best and everyone else, just by definition, what everyone else does is minimal.
Mm-hmm.
He is willing to acknowledge the great things that Darius and Cyrus have done, as well as like the Greeks. In fact, you see more of an emphasis on the Persians than you do on the Greeks yet. I don't really see any Greek heroes being being recounted in the same way that the Persians are. And to me, human knowledge and the great books, like what it should teach us, guys, is that if you think about it, you can think of like human society, and specifically to the West, it's like a giant human. And just like any other humans, they started out as children that knew nothing, and through experience had to build up knowledge that we now know today, right? if you're born in like if you're born in like a Western country like Canada or any other sort of country, that before you're exposed to any sort of education, you sort of believe that everyone just kind of knew how to do things and everything is self-evident. And no, like if you read history, and especially if you read like these big thinkers who moved like the sciences and history and politics and political philosophy and ethics and all that, like you realize that human beings, just like a child, we knew frick all. We knew nothing, and we had to build up our knowledge of the world. And yeah,
I think it's like most people like probably take a lot of the knowledge that we have like for granted.
For granted.
Yes.
Or they'll take let's say they'll take democracy for granted. Like, or they'll just assume democracy is just amazing. Instead, no, like we have to evaluate. The reason why we came to democracy is because there were people who were evaluating like, political systems and trying to find out which one was the best. You know, or like just the fact that we could just the questioning of things. Like that's the whole point of this liberal education, like the critical thinking aspect. In order to be a good citizen, that's what Mortimer Adler talks in his first book.
Oh, just saying, probably back then this was probably very fucking expensive to make because like first of all you have to travel to like a lot of places. You have to speak to a lot of places. A lot of people, and you have to write this down
On papyrus.
Was it papyrus?
I think it was papyrus. If not, the vast majority of these ancient writings were on papyrus.
Papyrus or whatever. Paper was expensive back then, and like no, it wasn't just that paper was expensive. People had to continuously keep writing it down for like 1,000 years.
Like the Arabs, right? The Arabs, part of the reason why we still have a lot of works of Plato and Aristotle, etc., is because while the Roman Empire, Western Rome, and the Eastern Empire was going through a bunch of crises, a lot of the Islamic scholars and philosophers were copying and translating things down from ancient Greek into Arabic. And then when the Muslims conquered Spain, there was a time where they got these works of Plato and Aristotle into Spain, and they translated from Arabic back into to Latin, and then went into the West, right? That and the Irish. The Irish in Ireland, the monks were also copying things down and sort of saved Western civilization as well. But yeah, I mean, what I'm getting from this is that the people who were moving, like the truly intelligent people, were people who were thinking. Like this is really stupid. It sounds really stupid, but like they were self-critical. They were self-critical, and they were trying to find the truth, and they were. And you can see the path that this would lead to, right? Now, in history classes, you have to learn not to do relative, like cultural, not to think of yourself as like a superior culture. That's like something that's like if you spot a historian who writes like the Germans are the best or the Americans are the best, and you see this bias, like every historical department would easily criticize that now. And so it's so amazing that Herodotus is like conscious of this, like this fallacy of thinking that you shouldn't get into this fallacious thinking of thinking that your culture is the best. It's almost like he's bordering on like what would eventually become sociology a little bit. Obviously, he does not touch it, but the fact that he sort of intrinsically knows that he has to separate himself from his culture. This would eventually form sociology, right? Then back in the 1800s, sociology would come up to try to figure out why do humans do
I think
this.
like the reason he has to think that way is like, if you're writing of a lot of the histories back then, like you're like obviously like he has to like filter out a lot of things, but like what he gets from it is that, like the Persians were like an empire and everything, but they weren't like particularly horrible either.
Yeah.
Like all their citizens probably had as much rights as an average Greek person, honestly, maybe even more.
Yeah.
Because like was it like Xerxes' time? There wasn't even slaves anymore or something.
I'm not too sure about that, Paul. Now, Herodotus does a lot of like first of all, the Cyrus account is completely fictional. We know this, right? No prophecies, right? Like we probably
You can never know.
You can never know, right?
You can never know.
There could be prophecies, but we don't know how detailed they are.
Yeah, but like there's no like God that's like that gave a prophecy for Cyrus's rise. Like obviously we can't not prove that, but we're pretty certain.
Mm-hmm.
So there's still a lot of faults there. But you definitely see the sprout of that. And what starts that sprout? Commitment to the truth, wanting to find out what's happening, what's really happening. Right? He doesn't, and he's not obsessed with making sure the Greeks look amazing. He cares about the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what sort of sprouts that. Now, his methodology isn't perfect. It's not good. It's not far from like what modern historians would consider.
If it was done nowadays, it would probably be seen as unacceptable to do this.
Of course, but
this is the best thing they have.
But this guy started it, and this guy still got a lot of shit accurate. Like how the Phoenicians borrowed from, like the Greeks borrowed from the Phoenicians. That's accurate. How the Egyptians had like equality between the sexes. I think that they've confirmed that. Like there was a lot of things that Herodotus like accurately confirmed, like a bit, and a lot of things that were just not true. But his commitment to the truth, that little sprout of like being this epistemological change, you could say, like this start of like we need to find the truth. That's what education is all. That's what a liberal arts classical education is all about, right? And like we were all saying, like when you're born and you're not exposed to enough education, you sort of believe everything is just self-evident. Like like of course we have like an economy built on markets to buy stuff.
So they even have like the markets they had back then were probably extremely primitive.
Yeah, but like and also they wouldn't know what markets were, why they should even care about like the benefit of everybody as opposed to the benefit of the ruler, right? And of course, when you learn about like, oh, like we didn't know really what we're doing, but then you have thinkers like Adam Smith and Karl Marx who were trying to write about economics and how we should organize society, right? And then you sort of realize, they're just like me. Like humans make mistakes all the time, and like as like you could think of, like I said, we're specifically studying the West, where you could also attribute this to the world. It's one giant human, and it's just like any human, it's trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. But on a historical, societal, macro scale, it's like, oh, we got this economic system, right? We're gonna pass this on to like future generations, and they're gonna benefit, like sort of stuff like that. Or like the discoveries in physics are gonna then fuel even more discoveries in physics, So yeah, I understand why Herodotus is called the father of history, because he is, and it's all the way back to that cultural relativist like thinking. I'm sorry if I went on a tangent, guys. My bad.
Okay, that's fine.
But yeah,
I mean, it's important, this kind of stuff, right? Because Herodotus,
because it just shocks me that a guy back then would
exactly.
have this.
It's a very modern way he works,
Yeah.
right? And even if he is wrong, it at least shows he's putting in effort, right?
And
putting in effort allows other people to build off and say, okay, this is a bit exaggerated, this is maybe inaccurate, but at least this is what he's talking about. This is overall like the information he gives us.
Yeah.
We could build on that, and that's basically history of the world, right? Look at science; it's always one person building off another. This person,
But also, how do we get to like the philosophy of science as well, right? The idea of like evidence. We need we take that for granted.
Oh yeah.
But not everyone believed in that, right? Not every human sort of had that, right? And then it took like some thinkers in order to like create a big work that became that made sense of it and became influential.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure like the scientific method was like way like 1500s or some shit.
Yeah, it was. And it didn't start naturally by human beings just naturally like finally coming to that conclusion. No, it was like these well-educated, mostly men, right? Because nobody really thought of women being capable of learning to read or write. Everyone thought of them like we'll just use them for marriages, right? Mm-hmm. And so didn't really bother with their education. So unfortunately, we're not going to get a lot of the thoughts of women throughout these times. But like, it's just these men, like I said, they were in these extremely privileged positions, right? Like most of the people we're going to read were from the elite noble class because they were the only ones with access to this education and with the social connections to even get to the top. To then use their ideas to try to like make decisions on society. So yeah, and of course it makes sense that these people would start like the major philosophical changes, etc. But like we were all saying, the epistemology of science is taken for granted, right? Empirical evidence that didn't always exist in human history, and we're gonna see when that's gonna happen. We're gonna see when that huge change is. Oh, sorry, we're gonna see when that. We're gonna see when that huge change is gonna occur, and same thing with political philosophy. We're gonna see this evaluation of of which political systems are better, or what ethical way we should look at the world and stuff like that. I mean, yeah, we're obviously through reading these books, we're gonna see why our Western civilization went the way that it did, but we're also going to have tools to see what these great thinkers wrote and criticize them if we find disagreements, or agree with them if we find things that we agree with.
I think that's pretty much it of what we're talking.
It's a short chapter.
Well, like the thing is that like while it's very interesting, there's not a cohesive narrative besides like the
Ionian revolt.
Like I see this is all leading up to like a big Ionian revolt with
the big war between like Sparta, Athens.
Like I see like this is all leading to somewhere. So like
yeah, okay, yeah, we won't spoil.
Oh yeah, we're gonna spoil history.
Because Paul, you said like you didn't know what happened.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know what happened, but like you can't spoil history. And like it's like 100 years from now asking who wins World War II. Like
yeah,
really?
no, that's more obvious than
really.
Than who wins against the Greeks. Not a lot of people, not a lot of Canadians know that.
But here's the thing: this isn't like Dune 2 where you could spoil something.
Oh, okay, yeah.
We know the end result already. We're living it. We're living in the end result.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
So like I said, but like here's like this is like the one big problem like that's hard to talk about Herodotus. It's not very cohesive. Like at least in this chapter and the previous chapter, the chapters 1, 2, and 3 pretty good in terms of narrative because like it was just the first chapter it was about Cyrus. Second chapter was about
The Egyptians.
the Egyptians. Third chapter was about Cambyses.
Yeah.
And the rise of Darius.
Yeah.
Like in the end, like that's like, even though like there's obviously like there's Herodotus things like, hey, we're gonna stop just to talk about the culture of a certain city, state, or region. Like there's still like that narrative.
Yeah, let me explain to you like the source of the Nile for like 15 pages. Like,
But here, well, it's much more interesting than the last chapter. Which I'll be honest, it's fucking boring. I didn't like
fourth chapter.
I didn't like book 4. This one very interesting because like it is like having to take the approach where like all of these individual city-states are being coaxed into rebellion, and it's like, is there like one central leader in the revolt? I don't know. No. So like that would
it's just you could say Athens because they're instigating it.
like there's an instigator. But, like it's not like there's like one.
No, this isn't like Martin Luther King leading
This isn't like a Martin Luther King
or Nelson Mandela.
Or like if you want to talk about Civil Wars, this isn't a Fidel Castro where like you have like the guy,
Central figure.
It's like there's no the guy in this situation. You have like all of these like city states who have the same culture and like relatively the same interests, who like just wind up doing the same things.
Yeah, it's more like it's a system. It's not like the great man of history. There's a British philosopher named Thomas Carlyle, and that's the version of history he describes, the great man theory of history. He thinks that great men are what push history to happen. So Napoleon made a great deal of influence. Hitler and his persona and what he did pushed them. Now, modern theories of history are more focused on like systems. Can one person really change much? Yes, obviously Hitler had a lot of political power when he got in, but obviously Hitler was influenced by a bunch of different factors that both led to his rise and also his rule and also his fall as well.
And I also think that's also due to the fact on the way that Herodotus gets his information, which is by talking to people.
Yes.
And I wouldn't be surprised if all of this information he got were just people in the Ionian like section, which would probably just be Greeks.
But we know he went to Egypt.
Yeah.
We know he went to Babylon.
They'll be like where he got this specific information, running to the revolt, because like they're right there. Like
he most likely.
He probably went there. Like this guy travels. Like
it'd be nice to see modern scholarly like reviews of Herodotus.
There probably are.
Yeah.
But that's probably gonna be a while till we see that. But yeah, and I think the reason why we have like all of these sporadic things, which in the end, if you think about it, it does form like a cohesive narrative.
Yeah.
But like it's all sporadic because he probably like talked to these people who are in these cities and then just ask them about it. And like some of these people, like their great grandfather or grandfather.
And there's also bias as well, because if you're an Ionian, you're definitely going to portray the Ionians in a fashionable light. If you're Persian, you're definitely going to portray your people in a fashionable light. So there's also a degree of bias and over-exaggeration. And also, over-exaggeration not because of motivated reasoning, because they're your people and you want your people to be seen as really good. But also, just like it's been so long and they didn't record it, and just naturally, like through a broken telephone, they get the details over-exaggerated or changed or whatever.
But in the end, like that's probably like why like they're all saying we were coaxed into this because I'm pretty sure it didn't end up well for them. Like at that point, like does a rebellion get quelled or something?
I don't think it ends well for them.
Like
I'm not sure. I'm not too sure, but we'll see.
To be fair, it's called a rebellion, not a revolution.
Yeah.
So like we kind of already know
if it's failed. Yeah.
if it's failed.
Yeah, if it's a rebellion. Yeah.
Or so like probably not going to end up too well. So like
It'll be fascinating to see in book 6 where this goes.
Yeah, but again, it's not necessarily easy to predict what's actually going to happen every chapter.
Because Herodotus is like not that predictable.
He's not predictable, yeah.
Because we don't know if he's going to talk about battles or big character studies or just talk about random cultures.
Or like just
go back to the culture talk.
But I thought I got like for the first 3 chapters what he's going to talk about next, because like the first one is like he's talking about Persia basically.
Yeah.
And like the story of Cyrus.
Yeah.
Which is like it's hard to like separate them. Cyrus is Persia.
Yeah.
Back then. Yeah. And then like he's talking about Egypt, and like you have to talk about like the Persians when you talk about Egypt. But like I think that's probably just due to like how he saw history moving. Like there's Persia, then that they started advancing to the Egyptian Nile, and then after that, like Darius gains confidence and goes to Asia. Yeah. And I think like now he's going to Greek.
Your-
But then,
your robot.
but, like, there's always like that small part there where they're talking about Scythia and project. Fucking hate chapter 4.
And all the conquests of the Scythians, yeah.
Yeah, conquest, which is just running away.
Yeah.
And then like I wouldn't be surprised if for the rest of the chapters it's just gonna be Greece.
We'll see.
Because
We'll
like
see.
there's a lot to read here. Like there's a lot of like he probably got most of his information from Greek cities. Yeah, he traveled a lot, but like
He also got a decent, like Egypt, Paul. He got his info from going to Egypt.
no, honestly, he traveled a lot. Like
Babylon, right? He had big descriptions of the city of Babylon.
but he's probably gonna talk a lot about Greece. First of all, he's Greek. He's probably gonna be
But also he's known for talking about the Greco-Persian War
yeah.
as well.
So like we're probably gonna get like a lot of chapters on that.
Yeah.
And maybe like another
We
chapter.
haven't even touched all of Darius's reign. We haven't even touched Xerxes as well. Xerxes had a huge part of the empire as well.
Maybe it's gonna be like well yeah, we're in the second half of the book now.
Yeah.
So like there's I think 4 more chapters after.
Fuck me.
Yeah, I believe there's 9 books.
There's 9 books.
That's insane.
And by the way, after we're done this, we actually should see if there's any translations for any of these book names. Because like, what the fuck? What's Erato? What's Polymnia? Urania? Maybe that has to do with the sky.
What from?
Yeah, like all because all the books have names.
Oh yes, true.
Book 1, Clio. Book 2,
Like the meanings.
yeah, maybe there's meanings. Because like we probably should have done this with Aristophanes, where that part where we didn't know their names actually had a meaning. And yeah, maybe we'll go to you next.